Karat.
Right.
How are you?
Gregory Jones. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. How's everything?
Good. We're wrapping up the year.
Wrapping up the year. We're going to talk about it. So, Sai, I want to talk to you. I want to start the conversation by what's on everybody's mind who has the audacity to rent or own or buy an apartment or live in New York City.
Yeah.
Are rents going up or down in New York City, Sai? Let's get right to it.
Well, I feel that the post-pandemic surge of rents going right back up, has calmed down quite a bit. People know what they want. They want value. They want location. They have a checklist they come in with. It's a different energy from people looking now than it was previously. And I think we had a couple of years where the rents just were lowered because of the pandemic, shot right back up. And then we had this huge influx back into New York of people moving in, and rents continued to go up. Right now, they've stabilized somewhat. In more demanding areas, they're still going up, but not as much as they were. And that's all, value and demand, honestly, based on that.
So when you say they're stabilizing, what are they stabilizing at? What are we talking about? What's an average rent for an apartment?
I'd say in Manhattan, you're looking at your average rent's about $5,300. Mm-hmm. In Brooklyn, maybe you're looking at around $4,000. Mm-hmm. But that is, not the whole gamut. There's a whole gamut of apartments. That's sort of the mid-range right there.
Sai, you specialize what? So we kind of skipped the introduction because we were so excited to get your insight.
But
tell us a little
my
bit
name
about
is Sai.
yourself.
I'm a real estate agent, and I work in sales and rentals, mid to luxury rentals. Mm-hmm. But in New York, everything's luxury with these prices.
Absolutely, right? Everything's luxury.
And now what I see is, we have the luxury apartments are no longer grand marble countertops and golden sinks. It's about good light. It's about a quiet environment. It's about a fast-acting building when there's an issue. All of these things are really taken into consideration. So luxury has really shifted, because you can easily go see a 3-bedroom apartment in the West Village that is $17,000 a month, and it's in a nondescript building. You wouldn't expect those rents for that location, but that is where we are. People want value. It's not your parents' luxury anymore. It's a new luxury. It's quiet luxury.
So what is that? What is
efficient luxury?
So you work with a lot of renters.
It's not showy as much.
Right. So what is important to them? What if someone has and they have a good budget in New York City, or even if they have an unlimited budget, what do you think is the most important?
I'll tell you what the 3 main things I heard the most of are.
Yeah.
It is location, proximity to wherever they need to be. It is quiet. A lot of people come from places where there was either noisy neighbors or issues with the building or construction. And the third thing is light. Mm-hmm. In New York, we have a major light issue. A lot of buildings are butted up against each other. People need light a lot of times. So it's the first thing people will ask me about. Those 3 points: location, light, and sound.
So I think location is the old real estate adage, location. So I think most of the viewers here will be able to relate. Let's talk about light. So maybe someone living in Florida or someone watching this podcast in California doesn't really understand the lack of light we have in certain areas of the city. So are you seeing a premium for that? You work with landlords, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when you work with landlords and you're advising them on rents, if you see, for example, that there's an apartment that has an abundance of light, which is typically south-facing, right?
Yep.
Although there's different vintages.
Yeah.
Northern light is nice in the morning.
You have morning light coming from the east.
Are there premiums that you would advise those landlords to be getting on that? Are there premiums that you could expect, the tenants can expect to pay for it? And what is that light premium, if you will?
Well, I really do take into consideration all those factors when I am giving my suggestions to any landowners, any multifamily owners, because it is so imperative to nail the pricing correctly. Otherwise, you're going to have apartments sitting on the market. And I don't want that, and the owners don't want that. So if I am on the top floor, west-facing unit, comparatively speaking, I know there's a lot more intrinsic value in that unit than, let's say, a same-size unit in the back of the building. So we price that in to the rent that we are.
So what is that? Let's talk about that. top floor, west facing, southwest facing. How much of a premium you get, you think, for the same line on a lower level with much little light?
You know, let's take Brooklyn, for example. Let's take the average price in Brooklyn. And so we're looking at a top floor apartment. Maybe we're facing a park. And so there's a lot of light coming in. And if we have that unit on the 6th floor of a building with a balcony, you're looking out into the park, and then we move down to the 2nd floor of a building. On the top floor, for let's say a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, we can usually rent that for $6,000 to $7,000 a month.
Right. So what's the premium to the one without the light?
So without the light, you're going to be looking at about $5,000 to $6,000 a month.
So you're looking at $1,000 premium
Yeah.
for light?
Yeah.
High floor.
Yeah.
And people are willing to pay that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've rented everything. And we have apartments all over Manhattan and Brooklyn. You know, Brooklyn's a hot market right now. It's a global destination. So
It's really changed.
I mean, people come right to Brooklyn. They want to pass right through Manhattan. I've met people from different countries, different states. There's so much appeal now to Brooklyn. It's become almost a second city, in my opinion. And I love Brooklyn. I mean, I'm a Manhattanite through and through. I went to NYU. I have a co-op in the East Village. But Brooklyn has really turned a corner in the past, I'd say probably 6-7 years. I think some of the big pivots were in Williamsburg. I mean, what we're seeing in Williamsburg has global name recognition. Everybody knows Williamsburg. And it's just spreading throughout Brooklyn now. And I've seen it spread from Bushwick, Prospect Heights, Park Slope, and now it's moving into neighborhoods that generally weren't that generally aren't as popular as Williamsburg. You know, now we're moving into Crown Heights, into Gowanus. They've rezoned Gowanus into all these a lot of luxury units are opening up there, and that was just warehouses for years. The last few neighborhoods left there are not that many in Brooklyn, you know, to turn that stone. And I think it's going to be a matter of time before it's all, you know, it's all.
So let's stay on Brooklyn. So I'm a landlord, as you know, and you
Yeah.
represent a number of my properties.
Yes.
So I'd like to talk to you about those. So we have about 200 apartments right in Crown Heights, an area that you mentioned, right in the park, Botanical Garden, right across from the Botanical Garden. Tell me a little bit about that market.
Sure.
Tell me where you think that market is going. Tell me where rents have gone since you started working on it. And then I'd also like you to, it's a 3-part question, so take it one at a time. What you've done intuitively to market those apartments. You've achieved record pricing per foot for me, certainly for the neighborhood. And I'd love to hear kind of what you did to achieve those goals for anyone who's listening, to see what they could do to match that, or anyone who's interested in what it takes to be a successful broker here. So if you could kind of break that down.
Absolutely. First of all, that's been a great journey with you in the Crown Heights development. And it's impressive how you've had your finger on the pulse in many neighborhoods before they have become quite popular. What we're seeing now in Brooklyn, there's probably about 1,000 apartments opening up right behind your buildings. It is becoming a very hot neighborhood. And we were initially there in the pre-pandemic. And then the pandemic hit. And you had spent a lot of time and money renovating these apartments beautifully to a T. I mean, these are gorgeous, exposed brick, balconies, hi-hat lights. These are things I don't generally see in a lot of my other apartments I rent. There was a lot of character in these buildings. You took the old and you mixed it with all the new amenities people want. And that was the perfect combination of, making an apartment really appealing, honestly. And during the pandemic, we still had, Brooklyn wasn't as popular as it is now during the pandemic. People started moving there. They wanted to be by the park, because you're right on the park in Crown Heights. They wanted outdoor space. I started to see that coming. And then it really didn't take off until about a year or two once we started to come out of the pandemic. And then I really saw a shift of moving into Brooklyn. And there was a lot of supply and demand. We were renting apartments quickly, and people wanted, more, wanted to be on different higher floors. They wanted larger units. So that played a role in the pricing, because we started those apartments were on sale, as I'd like to say. I mean, people who have initially...
Tough times to rent during the depths of COVID, if you remember.
The depths of COVID. I mean, I was renting through the phone, on FaceTime tours, on Zooms. It was a unique experience, to say the least. And to also rent sight unseen to people makes me uneasy, because I know I want all of my customers, all of my clients, everyone I work with to be extremely happy. And when nobody looks at the product they're about to sign off on, it's cause for concern. But it was reassuring when that started happening that people were happy and content. And there's a really high renewal rate in that building. And we've been competitive with our rents compared to the surrounding neighborhoods like Park Slope and Prospect Heights. But there is, in the moment right now, I think I've seen this happen with like the East Village and with Williamsburg and with Bushwick. There's a cool factor happening. A lot of people think this is Prospect Heights, Crown Heights are having that. I'm meeting with people like young people just graduating. Oh, we want to live here. We heard it's so cool. We have this and that. And once you have that sort of out in the world, it's really nice, because people come in and they are excited and they're looking forward. They tour their hat. And that's really exciting with Crown Heights and what you've done, because that wasn't the case when you first started opening up those apartments in the beginning of the pandemic. It was a very under the radar neighborhood, especially. And it's shocking because, it's right on the park, right across the street from the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens. You have the Brooklyn Museum on the corner. You're sandwiched in between two great neighborhoods filled with restaurants, lots of nightlife, everything.
So Crown Heights is a hot neighborhood, so that's good. So that's good. I'm happy to hear that. Talk to me about, so more generally, give me some neighborhoods in whether it be Brooklyn or Manhattan that you see as emerging, under the radar, good potential investments for people looking to buy. Talk to us about some areas that, is maybe not the West Village on James Street.
Right. And, we've experienced that. I've shown up with buyers and they think that, we've looked at a property in Chelsea and we've looked at a property in Tribeca, and it's too small, it's too expensive, et cetera, et cetera. And then I say, let's go to the Lower East Side. Let's go to, Midtown West. Let's go to certain different neighborhoods that aren't so popular, and we could find a little bit more value for your money. Now, a lot of it's determined on where they need to be, where they're working, where they're going to school, whatever it may be. But generally, there is value in Manhattan, and there is value in Brooklyn. You just have to be privy to weeding through the listings and looking and looking. If something is priced competitively in New York, it tends to rent or sell fast. So there's that. But
what about neighborhoods, though? Talk to me about anyone who's watching this podcast looking to make a avant-garde, ahead of the curve investment. Give me some areas in Brooklyn, Manhattan. Maybe there are none in Manhattan. Maybe there are none in Brooklyn. Tell me some areas you think are underappreciated, and might get to that Crown Heights level that was, we came from a couple of years ago.
Manhattan, you start to feel there's been no stone unturned at points. You really do. This summer I worked with buyers who had a beautiful co-op in the West Village. Really nice location in the heart of the West Village. It's hard to leave that and, let's say, go to Morningside Heights all the way uptown, or go maybe into the Bronx or Harlem, some lower, we could get a little bit more bang for your buck, honestly. But generally, there are units there worth touring, worth seeing. But people really have in mind where they want to live, and it's hard sometimes to sway them out of that. And that's what I've noticed in Manhattan. If someone wants to be downtown, they want to be downtown. And I understand that. I really do. And that's why I've taken people outside of Soho, outside of Tribeca, into Alphabet City, where I worked on a buy last summer, or into the Lower East Side, where a friend of mine just purchased a larger property there. You get a lot more value and maybe a little bit off the beaten path, but still pretty central.
Right. So are you thinking Alphabet City, the Lower East Side, or some areas or neighborhoods in the city specifically that are good investment points and we could see a lot of appreciation?
Yes. And if you want to go, when I was younger, the Upper East Side was always high value. You could get a good deal there, get good rent. That couldn't be any further from the truth right now. Upper East Side is a hot neighborhood. A lot of people want to be there. Okay, let's go look at Morningside Heights. Morningside Heights is a beautiful neighborhood. I think you're familiar with up there as well. Gorgeous old buildings, a lot of value in them. And so I've taken a lot of potential buyers up there, taken them a little bit north. You know, people want to be on Central Park, but Central Park is hitting record numbers. And also there's not a lot of inventory. If someone wants a view of a park, there's other parks we could go get a view of. So it's just sort of really doing the research and seeing where else you can branch out into. Some of the other neighborhoods I'm really keen on that I think is having a moment right now. And it never was a long time ago. It sort of had a bit of there was a stereotype attached with, let's say, Murray Hill, for example. I'm not sure why. You're right in the center of Manhattan. You're right on the east side. You're close to Gramercy. You're close to the East Village. You're close to Midtown. And I'm seeing now people want to circle back to that area. And that's the case I've noticed with neighborhoods that weren't necessarily appealing in the past. People are more open-minded now because New York has just become it's a beast.
So what about Brooklyn? You mentioned Gowanus.
Yeah.
Are there any other neighborhoods in Brooklyn you can think of that are emerging?
Yes, I think that the next emerging neighborhoods for Brooklyn are, well, right now we're in the middle of Crown Heights.
Yeah.
We could talk about that. We've seen a lot of development happening. Now, below Crown Heights, you have Prospect Lefferts Garden, and it's called the Historical District. So some of these streets, like Maple Street, if you walk down it, it is these beautiful homes that are incredibly well preserved, that are 150, 200 years old. And that neighborhood is having a resurgence now in the rental market because people appreciate being near the park, being by a lot of trains. Having that access is key. And right below PLG is Flatbush. Now, Flatbush is still an affordable neighborhood, but how long will it be before that changes, honestly? I'm seeing a lot of high rises pop up there. I'm seeing rents go up compared to 5 years ago significantly. And people are shifting out of the Park Slope mindset. Park Slope was pretty much the first pioneer in Brooklyn. I know, everyone would move from Manhattan and talk about Park Slope. Very familial. A lot of people thought it's a great place to raise families. That is no longer the case. About 2 months ago, Prospect Heights overtook Park Slope for the highest bids for townhomes. So it just goes to show you how the market shifts with the times and where people need to be. There's no more inventory in Park Slope. Prices went up exponentially. Now we're moving into the Heights. We're in Prospect Heights. We're in Crown Heights. PLG, I feel, will be the next neighborhood. Gowanus is happening right now. There was a huge rezoning effort in that area, and they've built some beautiful high-rise luxury apartment buildings, and people are going to them. People want to live there. That used to be all warehouses. And the same thing happened in East Williamsburg and Bushwick. You know Bushwick as well. Bushwick is one of the hottest neighborhoods for young people. They all want to be in Bushwick. That's where they feel they want to go. And it has pushed rents up exponentially. It really has. Williamsburg has become so expensive that you have to look around it. And I think that's kind of what happened with Park Slope as well. People looked around it, went to the other side of the park where Crown Heights is, went north where Prospect Heights are. And you could see it. It's all developing. It's all emerging. And people are familiar with these neighborhoods. They reach out to me. They say, hey, what's going on in Gowanus? Or do you know anything in Flatbush? I heard it's still, affordable. The thing is, though, let's say with Flatbush, you don't have the developers coming in like you or other developers to work and build up that neighborhood yet. But I feel like it probably is coming in the next handful of years compared to what's happening surrounding it.
So one of the things I wrestle with when I'm purchasing real estate and deciding where to make my next investment is I think about the value, as we're speaking about now. Where can I get relative value? What does that mean? If I'm getting a discount, why am I getting a discount?
Right.
Does it mean rents or sales prices are lower? What will it look like in the future when I have an exit or I'm looking for an exit? And then you grapple with the more established, you mentioned location. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I have found is that expensive real estate tends to get more expensive.
Yeah.
So we talk about those areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
You briefly mentioned them, Tribeca, West Village.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, among probably the two most desirable in their neighborhoods in all of Manhattan.
Yeah.
You mentioned Williamsburg, which is
That's the most desirable in Brooklyn.
Williamsburg, Park Slope.
Yeah.
So how do we think about that? How do we balance that? So say you're working with a sales client, someone who wants to, and who says the same thing and says, I've heard about Park Slope. I've heard about Williamsburg. I've heard about Tribeca. That's where I want to be. Why am I looking in Gowanus? Right. Why am I looking on the Lower East Side? Why should I be looking to that? What type of value can I see? And can I ever expect to come to those levels in these emerging areas that these more established ones do? How do you grapple with that? How do you have those conversations?
It's one of the first points we will talk about, because most people want to invest in an apartment that's going to appreciate. They don't want to buy at the top of the market. They want to buy towards the bottom. And these emerging neighborhoods is where it's happening. You're not going to find that in Williamsburg. You're not going to find that in Tribeca. You're going to be paying premiums to be in these buildings. So if that's what you want, and you want to be in that neighborhood, I work with those clients and we find those apartments. But people who want to purchase as an investment, I try to steer them into these emerging markets, because time and time again, I've seen how the value increases with these units compared to the more established neighborhoods. It happened to me recently where I was working with a client who really wanted to be in the East Village, wanted to be going to Parsons, wanted to be by 2nd Avenue or 3rd Avenue. I was showing them what we could get for their budget. And then I took them further east between B and C and C and D. Now, that used to be no man's land. Now there's development happening. People really enjoy living on Avenue C. It's got great energy. And we found an amazing co-op there that was much more aligned with her budget and space that she would like to have. So I think it's the same approach, especially in Brooklyn. I've shown people a lot of properties in Bushwick that wanted to live in Williamsburg. But then when we got to Williamsburg, they realized just how expensive it really is. And just to give you context, when I bought my co-op in the East Village in the early 2000s, I looked at a loft in Williamsburg, and it was maybe $200,000-$300,000, nothing. I mean, that same loft that I viewed at 1,000 square feet would probably be $6 million right now, at a minimum. I'm thinking
Williamsburg was a different town,
but it was a different town.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
So, and that's what's going to happen with these other emerging neighborhoods. I think that's going to happen to Flatbush, Gowanus. Like I said, people love Brooklyn. Personally, I do as well. It is it's just another city, but in 20 minutes you could be right in Soho on the Q train. So it's got all the perks, and all the neighborhoods that are still flying under the radar, I think over time will become more popular. And, in terms of people trying to not buy into the most high-end markets, they will go into these neighborhoods like Gowanus, into PLG, into Crown Heights. And that's what we're seeing now.
All right, so let's talk about the difference in those neighborhoods. Let's get some numbers. So if someone's looking at Gowanus in comparison to, say, Williamsburg, what price per foot are they looking at in Williamsburg, and what are they looking at in Gowanus right now?
So Gowanus, there's a bigger range. You're going to be from about $800 to $1,200 per square foot. And like I said, there's many different types of buildings opening up there: luxury, all amenities, and also just reinventing the buildings that are there. In Williamsburg, it's much higher. You're probably at $1,500 to $1,700 a square foot, which is more expensive than some neighborhoods in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. But it is a global destination, Williamsburg.
So in some instances, just based on those numbers, you're looking at double be in Williamsburg than in Gowanus.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So think about it. You're spending $800 a square foot in an emerging market for a luxury apartment. Mm-hmm. In 5 years, where will that be? Mm-hmm. All the statistics, all the analytics in New York tell us that that's going to go up. I've lived in New York for a long time. I came here in the late 90s. I've been through 9/11. I've been through the 2008 global financial crisis, blackouts, Hurricane Sandy, everything. New York is like Teflon. The market is like Teflon.
Don't count it out.
Yeah.
All right. So you've given us a lot of good insights into the market. Let's talk about your business and your industry.
Yeah.
So fairly unfairly, brokers have a bad reputation.
Yes.
I'd like to know why. I'd like to know what you do differently. And then Tell our listeners or viewers a little bit about what the FAIR Act was in New York City and what it did for your business and the industry as a whole.
Yes, and I agree. There is a reputation in Manhattan and in Brooklyn for brokers, not being the best. And I've had to navigate that in my own way. Now, I'm someone who prides myself on clear and honest communication. And I like to be involved with all of my clients. And I've had a great experience so far with everyone I've worked with. I just want to make sure people are happy and make sure they get what they want. I personally think the FAIR Act shook out a lot of the bad apples in the industry.
So give us some context. What is the FAIR Act? What was
it? The FAIR Act, one of the biggest pieces to come out of the FAIR Act was that we no longer were able to charge a broker's fee. Now, in my case, I generally wasn't charging broker's fee already, but there were exceptions with great units that were either rent stabilized or maybe someone was renting out their home or their apartment. I was working with them, a friend, a family member. And in those cases, I would suggest that we would collect the fee from the renter. That way we could keep the rent low and rent it fast.
So let's just to clarify, you mentioned you don't collect a fee. You were referencing the tenant or the client would be paying your fee.
Correct.
So you would say that in many instances, you had the owner pay your fee rather than the client or the tenant.
Exactly. We would.
So the FAIR Act changed that, and it said that the only person who can pay the broker is the person who hires the broker.
Right.
So in many instances in New York, the landlord was hiring the broker, but the tenant had to pay the broker. So the landlord didn't have to pay the broker. So now, if a landlord hires a broker to list an apartment, to market it, to do what you do, that landlord has to pay the broker. So tell me what that did to the business.
I'm of two minds with this whole situation. We're in a tricky situation here because what we're dealing with is inevitably rents will go up because of that. You have to bake in inflation.
Why?
Well, you have repairs. You have electric bills. Electric bills have doubled in the past 2 years. You have boilers. You have all of these things and upkeep. New York is not a brand new city. These buildings are not new. They need work a lot of times. And that is generally how, the owners keep up with the demands of the building. And to now shift that cost back onto the owner's lap.
The broker fee
is problematic. But we had to work with it, and we had to make sure that we kept moving along. But honestly, we're in a place now where people are moving to New York for good jobs, doing really good things. Salaries are high. Paying a nominal broker fee to get an incredible low rent apartment never really was an issue for me because, like I said, I wasn't charging a fee on every apartment. These were exceptional apartments. There were reasons why we were charging a fee, and it made sense. Now that's not possible anymore. There were a lot of brokers I saw personally with my listings who would bring in clients, charge them a 15% annual fee to rent an apartment I had done all the marketing for, done all of the photos, listing communication with the renters, and just some broker would walk in, just bring them to me, and then charge them a 15% fee. Now, I never thought that was fair. And I think the FAIR Act shook those brokers out of the game. And that's a good thing. I don't think we wanted those bad apples just trying to piggyback off someone else's hard work to collect a fee. And I saw that time and time again. And so the FAIR Act, shifted that. But what it did is it put all that responsibility back into the owner's lap. And we've already been dealing with that since the 2019 rent laws passed. And so here we are again doing this. And the first thing I thought was some of the older buildings I'm representing, what are they going to do? Where are they going to get the money to repair the roof? Where are they going to get the money to repair the front door? That was the first thoughts that came out of my mind. And when you're renting a rent stabilized apartment that's very much under market value, to have the owner also pay my fee is a lot for them. So it became worrisome when we worked through it. I think that overall we've had to increase rents where we've had to increase them. The problem is we can't increase rents on rent-stabilized apartments. So people who are going to move into rent-stabilized apartments the owner's not going to be as inclined to fix something if something's happening. It's tricky. It's really hard out there. And I think we've all read stories in newspapers and read it online about these instances with, bad landlords and tenants and going through that. But if you zoom out and you look at it from just a purely financial standpoint, it's really hard. The math doesn't math a lot of times.
So, Sai, to wrap up, tell us what you specialize in, how people can find you, and what you can do for anyone in this jungle of New York City real estate to enlist your services as an advisor.
Well, my name is Sai at DALLIEN, so just put sai@dallien.com and you can email me. You could also go to our Instagram at DALLIEN Group and reach out to any of us there. And my number will be below in this podcast. I pride myself on communication. I feel like the most important thing to starting your investment into real estate journey, if it's renting, if it's sales, is a phone call, is a conversation. What are your needs? Where do you want to be? Why do you want to be there? What's your timeline? Can you wait a month or two? Do you need to move now? All these things are imperative for me to do the work I've done.
Right, it's not just a transaction for you.
No.
You're not just pushing paper, opening doors.
And I've worked with people that I've touched base with in September, and then I'm working with them in June, the following June, just because we've had that conversation. Oh, you could stay in your apartment for 6 more months. Great. Let's wait till there's more inventory, shop around. This is how I'd approach it with pretty much anyone. It's all different depending on what people's needs are.
And you do a lot of landlord representation as well.
Yes. I really like working with landlords. I'm really into marketing. I love doing the photography. I love writing the descriptions. I love communicating with the owners. It brings me a lot of joy to, produce that, show it to the owners, put it online, rent the apartment. It's full circle. I don't just open the door and show an apartment. I take it all very seriously. And if you're not doing the research to find out what apartments should rent for, they're going to sit on the market. So I'm constantly looking at comps. I'm constantly researching new buildings. I'm constantly looking at what the market is doing. What right now we have a bit of this is the slow time of the year, as you know, but we don't have any inventory as well. So it's timed like that. But generally, I feel the best start to your real estate journey is a clear and concise conversation with your agent. Talking about your needs, your budget, your timeline, your location, all those things. And then I personally could go and do that work and really come up with a lot of options generally. And then that's where it all starts.
Well, great. I can attest to your expertise. So,
well, thank you. Your expertise is great too.
To buy or rent in New York, or landlords looking for representation, we should contact Sai.
So, Greg, tell me about the real estate market.
Okay, so the investment property real estate market has been very challenged over the past 3.5, 4 years, really since the Fed started raising rates. Mm-hmm. That has been by far the most challenging facet of our business that anyone could have encountered or frankly expected, and nobody really expected what happened with what the Fed did. So just taking a step back, let's look at this from 360 degrees. Real estate is a beta of 1 to interest rates. Mm-hmm. Not the most complicated business in the world. Mm-hmm. We're not curing cancer. We're not crafting AI machines. We are buying property, improving it, and that property is inherently based upon how much non-recourse debt we can get on it. Anyone who tells you differently hasn't been in the business long enough. That debt is based upon the borrowing rates. So what can you borrow at? Mm-hmm. Anyone who owns a home, anyone who's purchased a property, anyone who frankly has rented an automobile, bought an investment property, a duplex, 2 units, 500 units, they're getting a mortgage typically. That mortgage is lent to you at an interest rate. How much are you paying for that borrowed money? From the great financial crisis, some of you are too young to even know what that is or even remember it, but I started my career at the end of the great financial crisis. Up until about 2021, we were in a historically period of low interest rates in the United States. So what we had was called quantitative easing. The Fed was supporting the economy. They were buying treasury bills. Inflation wasn't even in a conversation. I don't even think most people knew what the word was. And you could borrow very cheaply. People could borrow 2-3%.
So it was a great investment opportunity.
Great investment opportunity. Right. I used to say it was free money. Right. I mean, when people would talk to me about buying something, I would say yes.
Right.
Go borrow from the bank.
Sure.
at 2% and put it 20% down. I was telling people it's free money.
Yeah.
Prices were reflective on that. So people in real estate were borrowing at 2 and 3%. They were willing to pay cap rates around 3, even 4%, sometimes even lower than that at certain areas of the country. A cap rate is essentially what your yield on your property is getting. So the higher the cap rate, the less valuable the property is, the lower, the more valuable. That cap rate is directly correlated to interest rates, to mortgages. So 2021, we talked about COVID previously, have some supply shocks. Inflation starts creeping up in the national conversation. Inflation is the cruelest tax because it affects everybody.
Yeah.
Eggs cost more, insurance costs more, anything you can think of costs more money.
Restaurants, everything, just, yeah.
So how do people deal with it? Well, the Fed deals with it by cooling off the economy. The Fed is the Federal Interest Reserve. They're the bank. They regulate our financial system, essentially. And their solution is to raise interest rates. So the Fed embarked on a historic 550 basis point rate increase cycle, which was devastating for real estate.
Right.
So you used to be able to borrow at 2 or 3%, and now you're borrowing at 6 or more, sometimes 7.
Right.
So think about this. Someone buys an investment property in Florida, 250 units, makes some improvements, increases the rent roll, invests in the community, new appliances, maybe some new countertops, raises rents, meets his business plan, improves lives for his tenants, improves the tax base for the municipality because the property is worth more. And now they've got to refinance their debt or sell the property. So if you want to refinance your debt or sell the property, your property is valued significantly less because rates have gone where they've gone. So you have a situation where people could have executed all of their business plan. They hit their marks, they raised rents, they got their pro forma rents, and it didn't matter because rates went up so high, so far, and so fast. And when that happens, people are finding their properties are worth, forget the equity, it's worth less than the loan.
Right.
So what are you going to do? So now
less.
it's not a matter of are you making money, it's I need to come up with money to pay my bank back.
Right.
So you've heard about cash in refis where your loan is now up. Say your loan was $10, well now the bank goes, you say to the bank, okay, I'd like to get a new loan. And the bank says, okay, I'm willing to lend you $7. So you need to come up with $3 to pay me back my 10.
Right.
So that's been challenging. It's been very unforgiving, and you've seen it all up and down the spectrum. I would say that real estate has been in a silent recession from the investment side. AI and the stock market has done terrific, certainly. Other aspects of the economy have done well. Although I would say that's pretty much paired to 7 stocks. But the market has certainly divested away from what the Fed has been doing because there's been some outperformance. There was a tough year in 22. But real estate has been in a recession for the past 3.5, 4 years, and there's no question about it. So what's the state of the asset class? Well, nobody wants to invest in it. A lot of people have had a lot of trouble, from the big institutional owners to the private equity shops that used to invest in it, to the mom and pops and syndicators who raise money from doctors and lawyers and dentists and family members. They've really had a very difficult time because they bought at 3 caps and now they have to sell at 6s. Right. Or they have to borrow, they borrowed at 3 and now they have to borrow at 6.5.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of soul searching in our industry. There's been a lot of people who've had some tough times and they've lost properties. I think that it's the same song, different tune to when I started my career at the end of the great financial crisis. So I'm not smart enough to call a bottom, but I do think that we are absolutely troughing along the bottom, and I would tell everybody to buy what you can right now, and I think you're going to look like a genius in 3 years.
Right, because you can't time the bottom.
No, I don't think you can time the bottom, but you can look at tea leaves and let's see what's happened. So
exactly.
The Fed has been cutting rates. The current administration is about to control the Fed board. They're going to have at least 2 appointees next year. And rates are going to come down. I think rates are going to come down quicker than people think.
And we're already seeing that. We've already seen...
I mean, you've seen some... You have seen the long bond continue to be stubbornly higher. Yeah. Long-dated U.S. Treasuries, and we can get into why I think that's happening. But I think that a lot of people don't have the right expectations for where rates are going to go. Right. Real estate's a beta of 1 to interest rates. And as rates come in, real estate is going to go up and it will outperform all other asset
You've said
classes.
this multiple times since I've known you, and each time that has happened.
Well, let's
talk about the pandemic. During that, when interest rates were,
I was telling everyone to
buy. I was trying to convince people to buy. And then we're looking at interest rates now at 6-7%. Yeah. That's $3,000 extra on a $500,000 mortgage.
Yep. So I I have three facets of three intangibles, I guess you would say, that I look at when I'm buying real estate. And number one is you make your money on the buy. So if you buy cheap bricks, you're going to make some money. I bought my first building on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, November 1st, 2011 for $3.5 million, 25 units. That might sound cheap to people who are listening to this now, and $3.5 million for 25 units on the Upper East Side, but it wasn't so cheap then.
And they needed a lot of work.
Yeah, they did. This was the end of the great financial crisis.
And you don't cut corners. I mean, I know in Brooklyn, we have herringbone floors, we have highlights, we have marble countertops. There's no cutting corners like some of the other new builds.
We do a good job. But $3.5 million back then, it was the end of the great financial crisis. Nobody wanted to touch real estate. Yeah. Real estate had crashed the economy. Mortgage-backed securities, CDS, nobody wanted to touch it. At that point, my brother and I, who I started the business with, the two of us were in a windowless office on 55th Street, staring at each other, two desks facing each other, trying to figure out what we were going to do. And every person we went to essentially threw us out of the office and said, you have no money, you have no experience, please leave my office. Yeah. At that point, we had $165,000 in a hard deposit, a bunch of legal fees we couldn't pay, but I knew I had a good deal. Mm-hmm. And finally, we convinced one investor that we had a good deal, and he agreed, and he funded it, and he said, okay, this is a good deal. And you're not going to make any money on this deal until I make money and my investors. But if I do well, you'll do well. So we bought that building for $3.5 million. We sold it for 14, about a little less than 3 years later. That propelled us into our career and business and where we've grown it. But it was the same. I knew at $3.5 million I was buying cheap bricks, and I knew I had a good deal. I think now you can buy very good relative value on real estate right now because of where rates are. Back then you were able to do it because of what happened with the great financial crisis. It was a different situation. You didn't know if you'd be able to get a loan. Yeah. Credit's actually very plentiful now. Mm-hmm. But back then it was just as similar. No one wanted to touch real estate. And those that did really came off and did well. Number two for me is supply demand. So we were talking about New York City real estate. It's not complicated. Again, I say it's not a complicated business because it's really not. And there are people who try to overcomplicate it. Supply demand. So in New York City, there's very restrictive zoning laws. So in your business, I don't own much in New York City anymore, but we are involved, and I certainly started my career there. There's no new supply. Right. They don't let you build. That's
what I was going to ask you.
They don't let you. They don't let you build anything. Right. So they don't let you build anything. So what happens if you have less supply? Demand goes up. I mean, this isn't a complicated business. So people who advocate for rent control and all of these other just draconian policies that subvert supply end up really hurting themselves. They end up hurting their constituents. They end up hurting the areas they're supposed to represent. Because if you want to bring rents down, if you want to bring housing down across the country, build more housing. Yeah. And if you do if you do that, you'll see remarkable progress.
So just going off that, because I know the multifamily on the Upper East Side, multifamily in the East Village after the financial crisis, you had success with that. Where are we now with the multifamily?
Yeah, so we own about 2,300 units across the country right now, 5 different states. We also have a hotel business, about 350 keys. But whether we're in New York or anywhere else, kind of these three tenants that I'm speaking about, it applies everywhere. So supply demand, we've gone to areas of Tennessee, Western Tennessee, where it's not Nashville. It's not where everybody's piling in. It's not where they're having huge supply. And I love Nashville, and I'd love to go there and take my family and visit. But you have to look and see that's where institutional capital went. That's where supply went. And you're seeing reflective in rents there. I mean, Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee are leading the nation in rent decline.
I wanted to ask you about...
They built the most supply there. So I like to go to markets where I'm seeing an unfavorable balance of not as much supply and growing demand. Maybe demand under the surface that everybody's seeing. Yeah. I look for employers. I look for areas that I think that there's demographic growth that are trending in the right direction. Right. But I don't want to see heavy supply. Right. New York City will always be supply constrained. They will never let you build anything in New York City. So rents and everything are always at a
2% vacancy rate, nothing more.
Higher. And it's not complicated. And then the third thing is, I said at the beginning, is where are you in the rate cycle? Not even a question. So are rates going up or are they going down? Right. 2021, I told you rates are going up. 2022, I said rates are going up.
And they sure did.
And I've said for the past 6 months, rates are going down. Yeah. And our rates have been going down in some instances of treasuries. They've been stubbornly high in others. But where you are in that rate cycle is what you should be thinking about. if you can get on the principal side now, if you can, and it's not even a complicated business. You don't have to get up and down. You don't have to go up and down the cap stack, pref equity. I'm buying notes from banks. Buy good real estate right now. Buy good real estate at good prices.
Even at these interest rates.
Buy good real estate, absolutely at these interest rates, because they're on sale to where they were 5-10 years ago.
Right.
I mean, buy a 6 cap now when you used to have to buy a 3.
Right.
Don't overthink it. Buy good real estate. Real estate is on sale right now. People don't want to touch it. They don't want to invest in it. They've had a very difficult time in it. Certainly if you talk about the investment community, a lot of people are saying no to real estate funds right now. But the smartest guys out there are out there raising funds, whether it's the KKR, the Blackstones, and they realize that this is the part of the cycle where you're going to see a lot of appreciation.
So I personally know you've had a lot of success in emerging cities. I know Tampa, Memphis. You hit those markets before they really exploded, in particular with Tampa. And I was just wondering, what is your instincts? What leads you to these places? I know you said supply and demand, looking at the infrastructure. Is there enough housing for these developing cities?
I think it goes back to it's about the 3 things I've been talking about. I don't even think you need to, all of it relates to what I do. I remember we bought our first property in Tampa, Florida, 2015. 2015 Tampa was not 2025 Tampa.
Right.
All right. I remember one of my investors said, when I sent him the deal in Tampa, he said, "What are you doing in Tampa?"
Yeah.
He said, "Go to South Florida, go to Miami." Yeah. He said, "People from the Midwest, and no offense to people in the Midwest, we love the Midwest, we buy there. Go to Tampa." And this was a snobby New Yorker,
Right.
Go to Miami.
Right.
But I couldn't make sense of the numbers in Miami, and it's back to what I mentioned. It was too expensive. The supply, I just saw new cranes everywhere. Everybody from New York piling in there.
A lot of inventory.
And I said, where are we? What are the other alternatives here? Well, I want to be in Florida. I want to be in a red state with no income tax, business friendly, huge demographic trends going somewhere. Tampa, golf, on the water. Why would this not be an emerging area? Then let me look under the hood here. Let me see what the employment is. Let me see what the jobs are. And they were all very sound. And I was looking at what I could buy a price per door there in comparison to Fort Lauderdale, Miami. And I said, I think I want to make this bet in Tampa. So we got up to about 1,000 units in Tampa. We sold all of them in 2021. Our last property was sold in 2021. That if I can't buy, and it got to the point where I just couldn't make sense of the numbers, which is why we really exited New York.
Right.
I couldn't buy anymore. So if you can't buy, sell.
Do you see that turning around at all in New York? Do you see any way for that to go back to appealing for owners like you?
Here's what I will say. New York is a gateway city. I think New York will always hold value. I think people who've held on to New York City real estate through the cycles have done extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
I do think there are incredible amount of political concerns investing in New York City right now. I think that it's a one-party state, which is very anti-business and very anti-landlord, and has no understanding of what really happens in the private markets or how it affects people, how it affects a city budget. And I think a lot of the decisions that are coming out are extremely harmful. So I think you really have to have a very long-term view in New York City right now. I don't think that anyone looking to come in at the bottom is going to hit the bottom, because I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's hard to imagine that. Mm-hmm. But I do think at some point it bottoms out and you get a situation in New York City where 90s were tough. Giuliani and Bloomberg came in, and that really turned things around. Now you have some other instances at the state level here, which is affecting New York City rental policy, the 2019 rent law being the biggest.
Fair Act, yeah.
But I think in the long run, New York City pays off. I think New York City is on sale as it's never been before.
Right, yeah.
Properties that used to trade at 15 times rent can now be had for 5 times rent. But there's a reason for that. There's no income. You can't grow income. The new mayor is about to freeze all of the rent increases, which were de minimis anyway on rent-stabilized apartments. You have expenses going up double digits, taxes, insurance. So the properties are not profitable. And when people complain about how expensive New York City rent is, well, there's a reason for that. That goes back to the second thing I said, that's supply and demand. There is no new supply. Yeah. I mean, it's essentially illegal to create a free market apartment in New York City. Right. So you cannot increase supply here.
And then they wonder why there's rent-stabilized apartments sitting empty.
Yep. Yeah,
and I get this question a lot, and I have to really explain, these apartments need a lot of work. Like, you could fall through the floor in these apartments. These are infrastructure issues. This isn't a greed issue. This is major construction to get these into a livable state.
Yeah, I think people don't understand that. I mean, and it's not just getting a construction crew in there. In New York City, the permitting, the filing, the fees, those cost tens of thousands of dollars too.
Right.
I mean, the average rent stabilized apartment
The permits, waiting for the permits.
Is a minimum of six figures to bring back online. Right. So if you look at that type of investment, what do you need to recoup to have actual return on that investment? What do people need to
break
spend?
even? Yeah.
Right. So it's not a matter of taking a $700 apartment and giving an $84 increase, which is what they currently allow. Right. You'd have to get significantly more, multiples more to do that. Right. And I think that DHCR, which is the governing body of rent stabilized apartments, has a report up there's 50,000 vacant rent stabilized apartment. Wow. I would call nonsense on that and say there's double. Right. I'm in the industry. I know about it. I have vacant rent stabilized apartments. I think there's probably 100,000 rent stabilized vacant apartments that are just offline. So go back to supply and demand. That supply continues to shrink. Demand continues to go up because people want to be in New York and rents get more expensive. Yeah. So the solution isn't to demonize landlords. The solution isn't to tax them to death. The solution isn't to regulate them, to threaten to throw them in jail. The solution is to work with them and build affordable housing for everybody. Yeah. And the way you do that is you increase supply. So I think that's very important. And, you know, as I said, for those of you who may be watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, I think you should try to figure out how to get on the principal side right now. I think that this is the opportunity similar to what it was when I started.
By principal side, you mean
start buying things.
Just get in there. Just get into that market.
I think you need to get on the equity side and the ownership side in real estate, whether that's a duplex in Des Moines, a multifamily product in Georgia, a condo
investment property upstate,
a condo in Gowanus.
Right.
I think that real estate is troughing along the bottom right now. I think that in 2 or 3 years, you're going to look very, very smart. Right. Real estate is a cycle business. Fortunes are made and lost every single cycle. And the ones that maintain and the ones that really grow outsized are the ones who are able to navigate those cycles and recognize when they're turning. Yeah. And not be emotional about it.
Right. Because there is a big emotional attachment.
And move on to fight another day and find opportunity when it's there and take advantage of what's happened to the market in these over-levered positions. And if you can find an investor, if you can speak to some friends and family, if you can figure out a way to get some stuff together for a down payment, take advantage of these values, because I think in 5 years you're gonna realize where pricing is, and you're
kicking yourself.
You're gonna be banging your head against the wall, trying to figure out how you can buy this expensive real estate. And stuff's on sale. Yeah. And when stuff's on sale, you should be buying. Yeah. Real estate's on sale, and we should.
That was what I was trying to tell everyone during the pandemic. Everything was on sale, but it was a really scary time for the country,
it's hard.
For the world.
It's hard for everybody. The hardest thing to do is
you got to take the risk to,
The hardest thing to do is to take that contrarian view. Yeah. The hardest thing to do is to go against the grain when everyone's going the other way.
Exactly.
And when your advisors, your attorneys, your accountants, the newscasters,
advising against
the newspapers,
planting the seed, it's bad. It's going to get worse.
Everything's going the other way. Look, there's plenty of times where people are too early and they've bought into a sinking ship. But I think you need to do your own analysis. You need to look at things, and you need to figure out. Go back to those 3 things I said, and go to the last point I made. Where are you in the interest rate cycle? Yeah. And rates are going down. Right. Now let's talk about this too, because I think some people might say, I'm sure there's plenty of smart people watching this, and they're going to say, well, Greg, since the Fed started cutting, the 10 year's actually up. And yeah, it is up. And why is that? Well, I think it's up for 2 reasons. One is there was, I believe, an overreaction to tariffs. I think that there was an expectation that tariffs were going to very much increase inflation. That has not been the case. But I think people have felt that way. And then number 2, I think people are rightly and justifiably concerned about the deficit. Yeah. And they're saying to themselves, well, I don't want to be buying a 10-year treasury when we have deficits exploding by trillions of dollars a year. So what do we do about that? Well, you have to have an administration who's mindful and cognizant of the deficit, and hopefully will reduce spending. The current administration has been reducing the deficit by a couple hundred since it's taken office. But here's what I will say about that. And you actually saw it at the end of this Fed meeting. If the long bond, and when I say long bond, I say longer term dated U.S. Treasuries, so typically 5 years and longer, continue to go up from, let's call them the bond vigilante, so the capital markets who price our debt, people who buy our bond, is what type of yield they want. You're going to see what's called QE. The Fed's going to come in and do yield control. The Fed's going to buy those bonds. and that will drive prices down, which is what they did from 10 to 21 or 20. And the reason that's going to happen is because they need to finance their debt, and you're gonna see that happening. And they actually, at the last Fed meeting, they ended QT a couple months ago, and they've actually started doing some QE. They're doing short-term treasuries to provide what they call liquidity. That's the first step. So I think either way, I think that's a safe haven that people can fall back on, that I do believe that the Fed will be accommodative to maintain the long-term bond and make sure rates don't go higher. This administration, he's a real estate guy. He knows everything that I'm talking about and how important it is, and they're going to be mindful of controlling that. I think other future administrations will too, and I think that you're going to find that the U.S. is the best house in a bad neighborhood, and people are going to start buying our debt again. And I think if we, without getting too much abroad here, stable coins are something that I think people should look into. Stable coins, which are backed by U.S. Treasury, is essentially the way to trade in and out of U.S. dollars without exchange rates. And if those are all pegged to treasuries, so you look at these stable coins being the biggest buyer of treasuries.
Better investment than the stock market right now.
Or not necessarily the stock market, just the ability to get your money in and out of different currencies, all backed by U.S. dollars that are essentially purchased by treasuries. I think you'll see that bring stuff down. And I think you'll see rates are going to come down faster than people think. And I think it's a great time to be in real estate.
Great. I have one last question before I let you go. I know you're busy. Where do you see AI taking this industry in the future? Where is it? What's it doing for agents? What's it doing for owners? How do you see it developing into?
So real estate has always traditionally been the least forward-thinking, technologically driven, or one of them, industries in the country. There are still people who have paper leases. We've bought buildings where there's no electronic leases, and we've had to do lease reviews, paper leases, in an office.
Wow.
Which is astounding if you think about it. A lot of it's because there's generational wealth in real estate. There's people who've owned property through multi-generations.
And set in their ways too, people.
Yeah, and they haven't felt the need to innovate. I will say that the first movers and the innovation in real estate is coming. AI is coming everywhere, and I think those who adapt it most usefully and effectively and judiciously are going to be first movers, and it'll be reflective in their properties. So we've started implementing AI across all of our properties, leasing, maintenance, applications. We use AI. Not only does it save us, not only is it productive, not only is it helpful to the investment, not only is it helpful to the property, AI is available 24/7. AI is never on their phone.
It's never tired.
AI is not hanging out on social media.
It doesn't have a hangover from a long weekend.
AI is not calling in sick at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And some of that's scary, right? Because there's different human interaction. But what I will say about that is we're all going to be successful in this economy if we learn how to work with that.
Right.
I mean,
it's a tool.
It's a tool. I mean, think about the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
I mean, think about all those people who would have resisted that and say, I want to stay with horse-drawn buggies. Yeah. It's going to take all my horse-drawn buggies away.
In just even a practical sense, just comp reports, just things like this, what it's done for me, you've seen it. Yeah. It's impressive. It's an impressive tool.
Yeah, it's a tool. And it's gonna be useful for owners. It's gonna be useful for tenants. It's gonna streamline communications. It's gonna streamline rent payments, maintenance requests.
Right.
It's something that we should be embracing. And those who are first movers in that in our industry, I think will be rewarded and recognized for it. And it's something that I think there's a lot of opportunity in real estate because there's so few people who even use today's technology, and if you're starting to use tomorrow's technology,
you could really go far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Greg, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate the insight, and I look forward to another great year.
All right, Sai. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
All right.